Minister of State and Dennis and colleagues from all over the world. If I get to do what I want to do, as Dennis said, this is exactly what I want to do. Be together with you, first in the wonderful hospitality of your government, Minister, and in the Foreign Office, which is a very great honor for us. And still with the words of the Chancellor in our ears, because she inspired us today, as she does, and she plays a unique role in the world. And so the chance to be with her in person and to hear her is extremely moving for us. We get to go home and share the fact that the whole world's not crazy, which sometimes you might think. I'm going to even argue that it's concentrated in one narrow part of my country. And that we have a lot of wonderful opportunity, even better than we realize, but we have a lot of hard work to do. And the think tanks are key to that, because probably the hardest thing we have to do is think. What should we be doing? How are we going to make the changes that are needed? It's not simple, but it is achievable. And the network that Dennis Snower has established and the T20 process that you and Dirk Messner, our dear friend, put on the map last year, and that you continue this year, and now I know will be continued for years to come, is a vital tool for all of us. Wherever we're coming, we know that we have colleagues, that we have a shared purpose, that we have people we can call on, that we have a way forward. So we're really grateful to you, Dennis, and I want to thank you. Oh, I'm out of the box here. Sorry about that. What do we need to do? I think what Chancellor Merkel told us today was a very succinct and excellent description. We need to work together at a global scale to solve the key challenges in front of us. What Minister of State Anand just told us about the priority of climate change is, by the way, an excellent and apt priority, and a good reminder that what we have to do is quite practical, in fact. We have certain tasks that are critical for us at this stage of global civilization, at this stage of global challenges. And we have the problem of not only imagining the solutions, not only having wonderful discussions and analysis, but actually getting some hard work done in a short period of time. We've lost a lot of time in some of the big challenges that we have, like climate change. We've known at least for 26 years since the Rio Earth Summit signed the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, we have an urgent problem. We've known really for more than 30 years in the scientific community that this is an urgent and growing problem. If you were really paying attention, we've known for at least a half century that this is a serious and growing problem. We've lost all this time. And now, with our feet right at the cliff of irreversibility, of runaway climate change, loss of biodiversity, cities that threaten to be overwhelmed with pollution, with water crisis, with forced migration, we don't have time on our side anymore. And so really our challenge is one of effective action in a short period of time. The world is changing very fast, and we have to be very accurate. We can't miss this time. We can't replay the period from 1992 when the Rio Earth Summit launched 3 great treaties on climate change, on biodiversity, on desertification, and then over the next quarter century utterly failed to implement them. We can't replay that. We don't even have time for one more stupid war. We've had a lot of stupid wars, most of them caused recently by the United States, have no doubt. We don't have time for even one more. And there are a lot of crazy ideas around in my country and elsewhere. We don't have a monopoly on crazy people. We're in the lead. But we can't afford a misstep. Let me give you a very brief analysis of how I see the world unfolding and the kind of politics and geopolitics we're going to need to get this done. And then a word about what our role is. Coming from think tanks and universities, we have a special responsibility now, and I want to say a few words about that. We are at the end of the American-led global economy, and we're at the end of American-led geopolitics. This doesn't mean the U.S. has disappeared or that the U.S. no longer has the most powerful arsenal. It surely does. And the U.S. has enough nuclear weapons to destroy the planet so many times it's unimaginable and absolutely uncountable. But the idea of the U.S. as, quote, the sole superpower or the indispensable country is gone. It's not gone in public understanding, but it is gone in reality. Because we've already arrived at a world of multipolarity. We've already arrived at a world in which people all over the world want their say. They don't want one country leading. They don't want one country determining what the rest of the world is going to do. They don't want one country bossing other countries around. They don't want one country breaking the rules. They don't want one country starting wars by itself. And we have entered, therefore, a new and complex period. How has this happened? Well, the idea of a single superpower anyway is a naive idea of international relations theory that, like a lot of theory, doesn't really have its place in the real world quite that way. The US is 4.4% of the world's population. The idea that it runs the world is already a little bizarre. But the US did constructive things for a while. But for the last quarter century, not so good. And actually, I would date the turn of US politics to the end of the Cold War in 1991. As Lord Acton famously said, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The United States never had absolute power, but it was corrupted deeply by the idea that it was the sole superpower. It was corrupted by the idea that now we have a US-led world. It was corrupted by the confusion that having military bases in 70 or 80 countries meant that you could do what you want, that you could make events go your way. Well, we know the sad story. It's been one war after another. In Afghanistan in 2001, in Iraq in 2003, in Libya in 2011. Not uniquely a US bad idea. Mr. Sarkozy had a lot to do with that one too. Former empires still love their grandeur too. A little war now and then never hurt them, it seems. And the US led the attempt to overthrow Assad starting in 2011. Of course, he was egged on by Mr. Erdogan. He was egged on by the Saudis. He was egged on by the Israelis. But President Obama, our good president, sent in the CIA to overthrow Assad. It was going to take 30 days. It's been 7 years of bloodshed. So what happened in the United States is we lost our way. We actually had a right roadmap in 1990. It was provided by Mikhail Gorbachev, actually. It was a roadmap of peace from Rotterdam to Vladivostok, of a common European home, of an end of the boundaries and the borders. That's why Gorbachev, who was the greatest statesman of our time, said an immediate yes to German reunification, because he was a man of peace and he was a man of vision. And unfortunately, rather than seeing that we had a roadmap to peace for truly a new world, the United States decided it had a roadmap to global hegemony, and that it would now clean up after the Soviets, and it would clean up Iraq, and it would clean up Syria, and it would clean up Libya, and it would clean up the other countries that had been in the Soviet orbit. And it dreams of cleaning up Iran, as if we haven't done enough damage to that country over the last 65 years. Remember, we overthrew the democratic government in 1953, installed a police state. As soon as that fell, we put on sanctions. We gave arms to Iraq to invade Iran. We started sanctions from 1994. So we've been at war with that country for 65 years. And then we wonder, why don't they like us? What's the matter with that place? But the world is changing, because this doesn't work. And simply making chaos, displacing millions of people, thinking that you can evade any international responsibility, that you alone can walk out of an agreement of 193 countries on climate, that not only can you alone walk out of a UN Security Council resolution, which under the UN Charter makes it international law, on our agreement with Iran, but even say anyone else that doesn't do it, we're going to sanction in an extraterritorial way. This doesn't work, except in the fantasies of some very strange people. Again, apologies from me on behalf of my country, of the weird people we brought to your attention. If you had known him only as a failed real estate developer, that would have been weird enough. Now you have to consider him in another guise. So we're at a cusp. We're at a cusp where the illusion of a sole superpower is coming against the reality of a vastly changed world, where the United States is no longer the largest economy in the world. That pride of place goes to China, where the Western world is no longer the center of global innovation, because the innovation's taking place in Northeast Asia, China, Korea, Japan, which is almost a unified economic area, actually. Absolutely rival what's happening in the United States and in Western Europe. So now we have three major poles of innovation, and three major sources of what economists call endogenous growth in the world. And indeed, that heartbeat of innovation of Northeast Asia is probably the most important impulse of economic development in the whole world today, because China not only combines its innovation, but it saves more than 40% of national income, whereas the United States basically saves nothing anymore. We no longer can delay gratification a moment. And our super rich long for more tax cuts every day till we utterly break the budget and turn our government saving into some kind of future catastrophe. So that's the path that we're on. A critical moment came in Hamburg last year at the G20. This was, in my view, an extraordinarily important moment. Donald Trump, who is under the sway of Republican leaders in the US Congress, who are completely bought and have sold themselves to the big oil lobby in a measure of corruption that in any other country would shock the world, but in the US and its genius made it all legal. We call it campaign contributions, with vast amounts of money changing hands. The US decided we don't care about climate. That is not Mr. Trump's idea, I can assure you. Anything that has Trump and idea in the same sentence, you should look. You should look with some skepticism. That was the idea of David and Charles Koch, who own the largest private oil company in the world. That was the idea of the American Petroleum Institute. That was the idea, though they don't say so, of ExxonMobil, of Chevron, and of ConocoPhillips. That is just corruption and corporate power for absolute disgusting ends, which is a few more years of oil profits till we have so many disasters that finally is brought to an end. And by the way, the United States suffered 3 direct major hits by mega hurricanes last fall, massive forest fires, and we lost in a few days, over a few weeks, $306 billion of climate-related damages. You'd think that would open the eyes. But the corruption is so high, the greed is so high, that we just keep going along. But Hamburg was a critical test because the Trump administration tried in its early days to break the Paris Climate Agreement. It tried to go around to its friends, to the Saudis, to Indonesia, to Russia, to others. Why don't you join us in pulling out? And one of our great global leaders, Chancellor Merkel, with a very, very steady hand and very clear thinking and a very soft-spoken and serious manner, held the world together. And so when Donald Trump announced that America would leave, not one other country of the G20, and indeed not one other country of the world, joined America. And that is a great tribute to your government, Minister, and to the great accomplishment. We have another test right now where I hope Germany and colleagues in Europe lead as effectively. It's a test of equal importance, actually. The agreement with Iran, the JCPOA, is a crucial agreement for peace. It's a crucial agreement to stop nuclear proliferation. And it is a crucial opportunity to re-welcome Iran as a normal country in the normal family of nations. And it is working. It's working despite the United States at every stage trying to kill it. since President Trump came to office. But we are now faced with a test, just like last year's G20. President Trump has withdrawn from this agreement despite it being international law under the UN Charter, because it was voted not only after being signed, it was voted by the UN Security Council. That makes it international law. That makes it a responsibility of every country in the world. But just like with climate, for other lobbying reasons, Trump has said, we're out. And as bad as that is, the United States also threatens so-called extraterritorial sanctions. Not only are we out, but you must be out too. You, Germany, you, France, the other countries must be out also. What are these extraterritorial sanctions? They are a blatant violation of international law. They are a blatant violation of the World Trade Organization agreement. They are a blatant violation of the UN Charter. How can one country threaten to sanction other countries for following international law? The very idea of it is outrageous. My hope is the Chancellor, President Macron, and others don't cross the Atlantic to beg for waivers, to remind the US President of special relations and all the rest, but rather that the European Union say very clearly, very firmly, in a very measured and quiet way, we follow international law. You cannot sanction us. If you try, we will meet you in the court of public opinion, we will meet you at the WTO, and we will meet you at the UN Security Council. And you will lose in all three places. And it's extremely important for Europe to say this. Why? Because if Europe crumbles and says, we can't help you to our companies, sorry, Iran, we wanted to, but the US is putting on sanctions, what international agreement can be safe at that point? If bullying allows one country to overturn the united will of the United Nations against all international law, how could we be safe? And the answer is, of course, we could not be safe. So this is a principle as well as an important specific instance of international governance at stake. This is the principle that no country can overturn the international law of the United Nations. No single country can overturn the international law that we've laboriously set in place for international trade and finance. And it is perfectly practicable for Europe to say no, because Europe, I happen to hear, has a perfectly good currency also, the euro. Use it. Trade with Iran in euros. Tell the United States you persist. The damage to the role of the dollar, that's your problem, not our problem. That's what the Chinese are going to do, have no doubt about it. If you read the newspapers today, they already invited President Rouhani in next month to work out how they're going to maintain all of their economic relations intact. What a good idea. How appropriate. I strongly encourage Europe to follow the same. Now, what kind of world do we need to develop? We need, first of all, a strong and successful Europe, a united Europe. Where we are and what Europe represents is crucial for the future. Europe, by every standard, is the center of sustainable development of the world. The Sustainable Development Solutions Network, which I am honored to lead for Secretary General Antonio Guterres, every year does a ranking of 170 countries or so of where countries stand on the path to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. I encourage you to look at those rankings. We'll release the next rankings for 2018 in early July at the outset of the high-level political forum. Look at the top countries in the list. It's all Europe, because Europe is the greenest, Europe is democratic, Europe has the longest life expectancy, Europe has high incomes and prosperity, Europe has substantially eliminated or fully eliminated extreme poverty. It has the narrowest income inequalities in the world. We need Europe to succeed and to lead, to show the world how this extraordinary quality of life can be a reality for all parts of the world. And by the way, I don't know how Germany does it, but Germans work 400 hours a year less than Americans. That's 10 weeks more vacation time. Congratulations. We want to understand how you do it, and we want it too. So what we need from Europe is not only your leadership and your success, but your example. Because to achieve sustainable development requires countries working together at the regional level all over the world. We have to end the Cold War ideas that you're on one side, we're on the other side. Because the riversheds aren't divided that way, because ecosystems are not divided that way, because business trades by proximity and geography. The idea of playing one country off against its neighbor, that's a divide and conquer strategy of empires. That is not how we're going to achieve sustainable development. The Arab world and Iran need to work together because they're fighting the same dust storms, they're fighting the same drying of the land, they're fighting the same challenges of decarbonization. These are not opposing sides, these are neighbors that share common problems and common solutions. China's not on one side and Japan and Korea on another side. Northeast Asia is, when viewed in innovation and economic terms, the most dynamic part of the whole world economy, and experiencing the same challenges of how to move from a fossil fuel import-based economy to a clean, low pollution economy. We need Korea, Japan, and China working closely together. The African Union is vital, but without Europe's success, the African Union will also not succeed. Europe, I should say Africa, is 54 countries. Why? Because in this city, actually, when you think about it, 133 years ago, some Europeans sat down around a table, probably not far from here, and drew up the map of Africa. That was not nice. That was not good. That led to 54 small countries, ethnicities divided between arbitrary borders that Europeans had no idea what they were doing. But we'll divide Francophone and Anglophone here. We'll divide the Portuguese here. We'll give the German colonies here. This was not how the world should be run. So Africa needs to reach scale, like China, like India, like the European Union, like the United States, like ASEAN. In all parts of the world, we need neighbors working together. We need neighbors not at each other's throats, not calling on one superpower versus another superpower. We need to end the idea that the US or others propound, just call on us, we'll help you against your next door neighbor enemy. We need the integration because the problems that we are confronting, whether it's preserving biodiversity, whether it's making rivers still run to the ocean, an increasing challenge everywhere, whether it's stopping the massive fertilizer pollution on almost every major rivershed in the world, whether it is tapping the renewable energy, which doesn't come neatly packaged within national boundaries. And I've noticed in my travels that Greece has a little bit more sunshine than Berlin, though you've given us 3 beautiful days here. It wouldn't hurt you to buy a little sunshine from Greece and to make a renewable energy grid that was a proper grid across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. That's what the logic tells us to do. So that's the kind of cooperation we need. What is our role in this as think tanks? Part of our role is to stand there, jaws open, amazed at what some politicians do. So we have to call out the bad behavior. It's not easy. It sometimes doesn't even seem to be prudent. I confess I have tenure. I've had it for a while. I think it works. I don't want to overstate for everybody whether this is easy or hard. But we do have to bear witness. And we have to use our training, our knowledge, to say more what the world can and what it should be like. We also have to work very hard on the detailed technical solutions to our problems. Technical solutions to decarbonizing the energy system. We're at the end of the story. There is no time to lose. Ignore Mr. Trump, just keep going. We will bring the United States back, I promise you. But you keep moving forward. We need sustainable agriculture because our food systems are killing nature. They're poisoning soils, they're leading to land degradation, they're leading to nitrogen and phosphorus fluxes, they're clearing the rainforests. We need to be able to say no, and we need to make our global food supply chains sustainable. We need to make our cities smart, fair, and environmentally sustainable. All electric vehicles. And thanks goodness that the German auto manufacturers are now on the case. We love riding in German cars, but there will be no more internal combustion engines in 15 years. So we are really hopeful that your wonderful automobile manufacturers move to electric vehicles, because if not, we're going to buy them elsewhere. It's not going to be an option. This is not a matter of consumer choice. This is a matter of saving the planet. We will all be driving electric vehicles soon enough. I hope that a lot of them are made by German manufacturers. Get on the case. We need to make the tools of the information age work. And again, I thank Europe for its leadership. The GDPR, the new standards on privacy, are a gift for the whole world. They show that there is a way for us to gain control of our destiny with this wondrous new set of technologies. I don't believe we can achieve sustainable development without the digital revolution. I think it is an incredible gift for our age, but it needs to be properly, democratically, and transparently governed so that we preserve our sanity, so that we preserve our privacy, so that we preserve our justice, so that we preserve our democracies from the likes of Steve Bannon and Cambridge Analytica and Facebook manipulations and others. And GDPR is an example of what we need to do. But as think tanks, we need to help our governments to understand that this is one of the enormous challenges ahead. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot of work to do. This is not a simple transformation. It's not just a matter of goodwill, though goodwill is absolutely essential. It is a matter of the best engineering, the cleverest new business models, new principles for governance, long-term plans, ways to revise our politics so that we're not chasing illusions on a short-term political cycle, but looking for the long-term well-being of the people. And in that regard, I also want to commend that we have to stop chasing the stupidest indicators, like the gross domestic product, as if this is a measure of our well-being and what we're after. And I want to commend to you and also thank the United Arab Emirates, which has appointed a Minister of State for Happiness. And then, please, applaud. And has taken on the challenge to create a coalition of nations to pursue well-being, not some illusory national income statistic, as the basis for progress, and put out this year with scholars from all over the world a global happiness policy report. You can find it free online. That's part of the Emirates' offer to the world. And I would urge all of you to go home, talk to your ministers, talk to the government, encourage them to connect with the United Arab Emirates so that we build a worldwide coalition of happiness. In short, Global Solutions makes all of us very happy. We are honored. We're grateful to be here. We're grateful that you bring us together for deep and intensive brainstorming. We're ready for this challenge ahead. I want to thank the young global change makers. You will be picking up the baton and carrying it forward in this great undertaking, and we watch you in awe and with great admiration and knowing that you're going to get the job done. Thank you very much.